In Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul says that the problem with humanity begins when people who know that God is there and they know who God is, don't acknowledge Him as God or honor Him as God. He says when they do that, they don't allow Him to be the one who defines what their lives are about, that they don't trust Him to be the one who tells them what's right and what's wrong, that they don't trust Him to be the one to guide their lives. And Paul says when they do that, people just start doing according to whatever they think is good for them, because they deceive themselves into thinking that they're wise. They exchange the truth of God, he says, for a lie. They start giving their hearts to seeking the things that God created rather than seeking God Himself. We live in a day and age today where so many people don't take God seriously as God. Like the people in Romans 1, we've been deceived into thinking that we can decide what's right and what's wrong, that we can be our own gods. We see an example of this in today's reading from Leviticus chapter 10 to 12. Remember, throughout the book of Leviticus, we see all kinds of regulations about what is clean and about what is unclean, what is acceptable for us and what is not acceptable. Now, none of those things were clean or unclean in and of themselves. It was all based purely on what the Lord said was clean or unclean. He's simply calling them to acknowledge Him as God and to honor Him as God, to give themselves to Him as Lord in total obedience as His people. He summarizes the idea in chapter 11, verses 44 to 45, where he says, "Consecrate yourselves fully to me and be holy, because I am holy. Because I am the Lord who delivered you from slavery and brought you out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore," he says, "you shall be holy, because I myself am holy." But back in chapter 10 of today's reading, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron the high priest, show no regard at all for the holiness of the Lord. Now remember, they had seen the glory of God just in chapter 9 appear to them a few days before this. Such an awesome sight that all of the people fell on their faces before God. Not only that, Nadab and Abihu had been with Aaron and the 70 elders when they all saw the glory of the Lord at Mount Sinai back in Exodus 24. But now for some reason, they reject the way that the Lord had told them to worship Him in the tabernacle, and they decide that they want to do their priestly duties the way that they want to do it. They offered what it describes as strange fire before the Lord, and as a result, it says that fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them. It might seem like a harsh punishment, but this wasn't a small thing. They weren't breaking a minor rule. They didn't just make an honest mistake. They were taking the very worship of God into their own hands and making a statement before all of Israel that they could decide how to carry out the Lord's business. They were specially chosen to lead the people to worship the Lord, but instead, they dishonored the Lord in front of those people. Their lives were meant to be fully dedicated to serving the Lord, but instead, they put themselves in the place of God, and so their lives were taken from them. The Lord said, "By those who come near to me," talking about the priests, "I will be treated as holy, and before all the people, I will be honored." Now, mercifully, the Lord doesn't take our lives every time we dishonor Him in the sight of others. If He did, we would have all been gone a long time ago. But the heart of our calling is absolutely the same. As children of God through Jesus Christ, 1 Peter 2 says, we are a kingdom of priests. We are set apart by God to represent Him, to share His truth and His goodness with the world. That's the reason Peter said he did it, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who called you out of darkness and into His marvelous light. And how do we do that? He says in chapter 1, "You shall be holy, just as the one who called you is holy." In other words, wherever we go, in everything we do, we surrender ourselves to Him in worship and obedience. Wherever we go, in everything we do, we acknowledge Him and we honor Him as God.